I spent 3 years in exile after NASA erased my Apollo 18 mission from history. But when I discovered the ancient beacon we accidentally activated is calling something toward Earth from the depths of space, I had to steal a satellite to warn humanity before it's too late. The structures we found beneath the lunar surface weren't relics of a dead civilization. They were a harvesting signal for something that views planets like crops ready for collection. But what happens when the very people who silenced me realize I'm the only one who knows how to turn it off? The alarm screams through NASA's Johnson Space Center at exactly 3:47 a.m., jolting me awake in the astronaut quarters where I've been living for the past 6 months. Red emergency lights flash against the walls as I stumble into my uniform, my hands shaking not from the cold, but from the phone call I received 3 hours ago. Director Nana Brooks had whispered just 5 words that changed everything. They know about Apollo 18. The hallways buzz with confused activity as security guards rush past me, their boots echoing off the polished floors. I've walked these corridors 1,000 times, but tonight they feel different, hostile, like the building itself knows I'm carrying secrets that could destroy everything NASA has built. My heart pounds as I approach Conference Room Delta, the same room where they debriefed us after every successful mission, the same room where they told us we were heroes. Commander Wendy Darling stands by the windows, her reflection ghostly against the storm outside. Rain hammers the glass like bullets, and lightning illuminates her face in quick, harsh flashes. She was my backup commander on Apollo 17, the woman who should have gone to the moon instead of me. Now she holds a thick folder marked with classification stamps I've never seen before, red letters that seem to burn against the manila paper. "Sit down, Peter," she says without turning around. Her voice carries the same authority it always has, but there's something else now, fear, maybe, or regret. "We need to talk about what really happened up there." The fluorescent lights buzz overhead like dying insects, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. I take my usual seat at the oval table, the same chair I've occupied during hundreds of mission briefings. But the leather feels different against my back, worn and cracked like it's aged years in just months. Director Brooks enters through the side door, her gray hair pulled back in a bun so tight it stretches the skin around her eyes. "Coffee?" she asks, pouring from a pot that's been sitting too long. The smell fills the room, bitter, burned, like something left too long in space. I accept the cup even though my stomach churns, needing something to do with my hands while they explain why my life is about to end. Brooks spreads photographs across the table like she's dealing cards in a deadly game. Satellite images of the lunar surface, orbital shots of landing sites, close-ups of equipment we supposedly never brought back. Each picture tells a story that officially never happened, documenting a mission that was erased from every record, every database, every history book. The president received a classified briefing yesterday. Brooks begins, her fingers drumming against the table. Someone leaked information about unauthorized lunar activities. Someone talked about things that were supposed to stay buried deeper than any crater on the moon's surface. My throat goes dry as I stare at the images. There's our landing site in the Torres-Litro Valley, the same coordinates where Neil Armstrong might have landed if Apollo 11 had gone differently. But these photos show disturbed regolith in patterns that don't match any official mission profile. They show tracks leading toward the crater's rim, toward areas that appear on no lunar survey map. "The Chinese are asking questions," Wendy says, finally turning from the window. Lightning illuminates the parking lot outside, revealing black vehicles with tinted windows surrounding the building. Their Chang'e probes have been taking pictures of our old landing sites. They've noticed inconsistencies in the geological surveys, equipment signatures that don't match mission reports. The storm outside grows stronger, wind howling around the building's corners like something trying to get inside. I think about the last time I heard wind like that, 3 years ago, in the space between sleep and waking, when dreams of lunar dust storms would wake me screaming. But there's no wind on the moon. There's no sound at all. Brooks slides another photograph across the table, this one different from the others. It shows a close-up of lunar regolith, but there's something wrong with the dust patterns. They're too organized, too geometric, like someone arranged them deliberately, like someone was trying to hide something underneath. "We have a problem, Peter," she continues, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The Russians have been monitoring radio frequencies from the Farside Observatory. They're picking up signals that shouldn't exist, transmissions that don't match any known satellite or deep space probe. My coffee cup clatters against the saucer as I set it down, the sound sharp in the tense silence. Outside, the storm reaches a crescendo, rain now falling so hard it sounds like static on an old television. The kind of static we used to hear during long-range communications with mission control, when Earth felt like the most distant thing in the universe. These signals, Brooks says, opening the classified folder with hands that shake slightly, they're coming from coordinates that match your last reported position during Apollo 18, from a place that, according to every official record, you never visited. The room seems to contract around me, the walls pressing closer with each word. I can smell the recycled air from the life support systems, the same metallic taste that filled my mouth during those final hours on the lunar surface. The same taste that accompanied the discovery that changed everything we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos. Wendy moves to the table and sits across from me, her eyes never leaving my face. Tell us about the structures, Peter. Tell us about what you found in that crater, and why 3 different governments are now asking questions we can't answer. The photographs blur before my eyes as memories surge back like a tide I've been holding back for 3 years. Memories of tunnels that shouldn't exist, of ancient technology humming in the vacuum of space, of a truth so terrible that keeping it secret seemed like the only way to protect humanity from something we weren't ready to face. But secrets have a weight that grows heavier with time, and now that weight is about to crush everything I've tried to protect. The silence stretches between us like the vacuum of space itself, heavy and complete, until I finally speak the words that will change all our lives forever. It started on EVA Day 4, when our geological scanner picked up metal signatures 12 feet below the surface. The memory hits me like decompression, sudden and violent, pulling me back to that moment when everything I thought I knew about the universe shattered like a helmet visor against lunar rock. 3 years ago, the lunar dust crunched beneath my boots with each step, sending up clouds of particles that hung in the airless environment like tiny stars. My partner, Captain Jazz Hook, worked 30 meters away, his white suit bright against the gray landscape that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Earth hung overhead like a blue marble, so beautiful and distant it made my chest ache with longing. Peter, you seeing these readings? Jazz's voice crackled through the comm system, distorted by the usual interference we'd been experiencing since landing. Grid reference Tango 7 is showing subsurface anomalies that don't match the geological surveys. I bounded over to his position in the low gravity, each step carrying me farther than it should. The scanner in his hands beeped steadily, its digital display showing density variations that made no sense. According to every lunar survey conducted since the first Apollo missions, this area should be solid regolith all the way down to the bedrock. But the readings showed empty spaces, voids arranged in patterns too regular to be natural. Houston, this is Apollo 18, I radioed, trying to keep my voice steady. We're detecting unusual subsurface structures at coordinates 20.1908 north, 30.7717 east, requesting permission to investigate. The response took longer than usual, filled with more static than normal. When Mission Control finally answered, Director Brooks's voice sounded strained. Like she was reading from a script she didn't believe. Apollo 18 maintains standard sample collection procedures. Do not deviate from mission timeline. But curiosity has always been my weakness, the thing that got me into the astronaut program and the thing that would eventually destroy my career. While Jazz collected rock samples according to protocol, I used the ground-penetrating radar to map the anomalies. What I found made my blood run cold even inside the heated suit. The structures extended in all directions, forming a network of chambers and tunnels that covered several square kilometers. They were older than anything human civilization had ever produced. The radar painted a picture of geometric precision that nature simply doesn't create, architecture that spoke of intelligence and purpose. Jazz, look at this, I called, showing him the radar display. These aren't natural formations. They're built, designed. He bounded over to my position, his movements quick and nervous. Through his helmet visor, I could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the suit's cooling system. That's impossible. The moon's been geologically dead for billions of years. Nothing could have built anything here. But the evidence glowed on our instruments, undeniable and terrifying. Using the drilling equipment we'd brought for core samples, we began excavating the area directly above the largest chamber. The lunar soil gave way easily, revealing layers of dust that had accumulated over millennia. And then, 6 feet down, my drill bit struck something that rang like a bell in the airless environment. Metal, crystalline structures, materials that didn't match anything in our periodic table of elements. As we cleared away more regolith, geometric patterns emerged from the gray dust like archaeological treasures. But these weren't human artifacts. They were something else entirely, something that predated our species by eons. "Houston, we need to report this," Jazz said, his voice tight with fear. "This changes everything. This proves we're not alone." I stared at the exposed structures, my mind racing through the implications. If intelligent life had existed on the moon, why hadn't we detected it before? Why hadn't the orbital surveys revealed these constructions? And most importantly, where were the builders now? The answer came when we followed the exposed tunnel deeper into the lunar subsurface. Our helmet lights cut through absolute darkness, revealing corridors carved from solid rock with precision that our best earth-moving equipment couldn't match. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them, patterns that hurt my eyes and made my head throb. "This is a mistake," Jazz kept saying, his breathing heavy over the comm system. "We should go back. We should report this to Houston and let them decide what to do." But I couldn't stop. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber that our lights couldn't fully illuminate, a space so large it might have been carved from the moon's very core. And in the center, suspended by supports that defied gravity, hung a device that pulsed with its own inner light. The crystal was beautiful in a way that human language couldn't describe, its faceted surface reflecting our helmet lights in patterns that seemed to tell stories. As I approached it, drawn by something deeper than curiosity, images began flooding my mind. Visions of ancient civilizations rising and falling across countless worlds, of vast intelligences that moved between the stars like gardeners tending crops. And I saw Earth as they saw it, young, fertile, ready for harvest. When I reached out and touched the crystal surface, the universe exploded into my consciousness. I saw the truth about humanity's place in the cosmic order, about the watchers who had been observing our development from the shadows of space. The device wasn't just a relic. It was a beacon, a signal transmitter that had been dormant for millions of years. Until now, the crystal pulsed brighter at my touch, sending waves of energy through the ancient network. Somewhere in the depths of space, something vast and patient received that signal and began moving toward our solar system. I had just announced to the universe that Earth was ready, that another world had developed intelligence sufficient to activate the ancient protocols. "Peter, what did you do?" Jazz whispered, staring at the now glowing device. "What did you just do?" But I couldn't answer him because I was still seeing visions of what was coming, of ships that could cross interstellar distances in the time it takes light to travel between planets, of harvesting technologies that could strip a world of everything useful while leaving behind only empty rock. We had found proof that we weren't alone in the universe. And in finding it, we had just announced our location to something that viewed entire civilizations as nothing more than crops ready for reaping. The crystal's glow filled the ancient chamber like captured starlight as I stumbled backward, my helmet crashing against the tunnel wall with a sound that echoed through my suit's communication system. Jazz grabbed my arm, his gloved hands shaking as he tried to pull me away from the device that now pulsed with rhythmic energy, sending waves of light through the crystalline network embedded in the chamber walls. My mind still reeled from the visions I'd seen. Entire star systems harvested like wheat fields, civilizations reduced to raw materials in the span of days. "The beacon's active," I whispered, watching as symbols along the tunnel walls began glowing in sequence, like a massive computer system coming online after millions of years of sleep. "I've activated something that was meant to stay dormant forever." Jazz's breathing came in sharp gasps over the comm system as he stared at the transforming chamber around us. Ancient machinery that had been invisible in the darkness now hummed with power, casting strange shadows that seemed to move independently of our helmet lights. The geometric patterns carved into the walls weren't just decorative. They were circuits, pathways for energy that flowed like liquid lightning through the moon's core. "Houston's going to ask questions we can't answer," he said, his voice cracking with panic. "Our EVA time is already 3 hours over schedule. They're probably tracking our location right now, wondering why we're not at the designated sample sites." But Houston felt impossibly far away as I watched the ancient technology awaken around us. The crystal device had shown me glimpses of what was coming, vast ships moving between the stars, following signal pathways that connected inhabited worlds like dots on a cosmic map. Earth was now one of those dots, marked for harvest by intelligences that viewed planets the way farmers viewed crop fields. "We have to document this," I said, activating my suit's recording equipment despite knowing that every word we spoke was being transmitted back to mission control. "Whatever happens next, people need to know what we found down here." The tunnel system stretched in all directions, branching like blood vessels through the moon's interior. As we explored deeper, following the now glowing pathways, we discovered chambers filled with technology that defied every law of physics I'd learned in engineering school. Devices that seemed to bend space around themselves, creating gravity wells in the lunar vacuum. Screens that displayed star charts showing the positions of worlds I'd never seen, marked with symbols that indicated their harvesting status. "Peter, look at this one," Jez called from across a circular chamber lined with crystalline displays. He stood before a massive screen showing our solar system, but it wasn't the familiar arrangement I'd memorized as a child. This map showed energy signatures around each planet, markers that indicated mineral content, atmospheric composition, and most chillingly, biological readiness levels. Earth glowed bright green on the display, marked with symbols that needed no translation. Ready for harvest. Optimal biological development. Minimal technological resistance capability. My stomach turned as I realized the implications. We weren't the first intelligent species to develop on Earth. We were simply the latest crop in a cycle that had been repeating for millions of years. Every mass extinction event in our planet's history hadn't been caused by asteroids or volcanic activity. They had been harvests, systematic collection of biological resources by beings that moved through the galaxy like cosmic farmers. "The dinosaurs," I whispered, staring at geological markers on the display that corresponded to the Cretaceous extinction event. They were harvested 65 million years ago, and before them, the Permian extinction, the Ordovician extinction, they were all harvests. Jazz moved to another display showing technical specifications that made my engineering background feel primitive by comparison. Ships the size of continents, powered by technologies that could fold spacetime like origami. Harvesting equipment that could strip a planet's atmosphere in days, extracting every useful element while leaving behind only sterile rock. "How long do we have?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the comm system. The answer appeared on the display as if responding to his question. 67 years, 4 months, 12 days. The time it would take for the harvest fleet to reach our solar system, following the beacon signal I had just activated. Less than a human lifetime to prepare for something our entire species couldn't possibly survive. But as we explored deeper into the ancient complex, I discovered something that gave me hope. The beings who built this place hadn't just been observers, they had been rebels. Hidden chambers contained weapons technology, defensive systems, and most importantly, detailed plans for disrupting the harvest network. They had been fighting this cosmic farming operation for millennia, world by world, system by system. "There are others," I said, finding star charts marked with resistance symbols. "Other worlds that fought back, other species that refused to be harvested. Some of them won." The crystal device at the chamber's center pulsed brighter as I approached it again, and this time the visions it showed me were different. I saw battles fought in the vacuum of space, entire civilizations united against the harvesters. I saw worlds that had turned their planets into fortresses, species that had learned to hide their development signatures, and most remarkably, I saw the network of rebel bases scattered throughout the galaxy. This lunar facility wasn't just a beacon, it was a resistance outpost, left behind by beings who had died fighting to protect younger civilizations like humanity. The technology around us wasn't just for observation, it was for war. "We can fight them," I said, my hands trembling as I touched control panels that responded to my presence. "This place contains everything we need to prepare Earth's defenses. Weapon specifications, shield technologies, communication systems that can coordinate resistance across multiple star systems." But Jazz was backing away from me, his helmet lights sweeping across the chamber as if looking for escape routes. "This is insane, Peter. We're talking about alien invasions, cosmic wars, technology that's millions of years beyond anything humans can understand. We're just astronauts collecting rock samples." The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like lunar dust. In touching that crystal, I had committed our entire species to a conflict that had been raging across the galaxy since before Earth's continents had formed. But I had also given us something no other harvested world had possessed: advance warning and access to weapons that could level the playing field. "We have to get this information back to Earth," I said, downloading files from the ancient computers onto our mission recorders. 67 years isn't much time to prepare, but it might be enough if we start now. As we prepared to leave the chamber, the crystal device pulsed one final time, showing me an image that burned itself into my memory. Earth as it would look after the harvest. A brown, lifeless sphere stripped of its atmosphere, its oceans, its entire biosphere. A cosmic graveyard like thousands of others scattered throughout the galaxy. Unless we fought back. Unless we used the next 67 years to transform our peaceful planet into a fortress that could resist the harvest fleet when it arrived. The ancient rebels had left us the tools. Now it was up to humanity to learn how to use them. But first, we had to survive the journey home with secrets that would either save our world or destroy the people foolish enough to believe them. The 3-day journey back to Earth felt like traveling through a graveyard of stars. Each point of light in the command module's windows representing a world that might have faced the same choice we now confronted. Jazz floated in his acceleration couch across from me, his face pale and drawn behind the reflection of instrument lights on his helmet visor. He hadn't spoken directly to me since we sealed the lunar samples containing fragments of the crystal technology, but I could hear him whispering into his private communication recorder during sleep periods. "Mission Control. This is Apollo 18 requesting updated re-entry calculations." I radioed during our second day of flight, trying to maintain normal procedures while the weight of cosmic secrets pressed against my chest like decompression sickness. The response came back filled with static, garbled transmissions that made Houston sound like voices calling from the bottom of a deep well. Jazz finally broke his silence as we passed the halfway point between Earth and Moon, his words careful and measured like someone testifying before Congress. "You realize what we've done, don't you? We've stolen technology that could revolutionize human civilization, but we've also learned information that could cause worldwide panic if it ever becomes public knowledge." The lunar samples floated in their protective containers next to my couch, innocent-looking rock specimens that contained fragments of crystalline technology capable of processing information faster than every computer on Earth combined. During quiet periods, I could swear I heard them humming, vibrating at frequencies that made my teeth ache and my dreams fill with visions of cosmic warfare. "The people deserve to know what's coming," I said, checking our navigation systems for the 100th time. 67 years gives us time to prepare, to build defenses, to unite the world against a common threat that makes every human conflict seem petty by comparison. But Jazz was already shaking his head, his expression visible in the reflection of his instrument panel. "You saw those weapons specifications, Peter. Technology that could crack continents, reshape atmospheres, bend the laws of physics themselves. What do you think will happen when world governments get their hands on that knowledge? They won't use it to defend against alien harvesters. They'll use it against each other." The thought had occurred to me during the long hours of our return journey, watching Earth grow larger in our windows while wrestling with the moral implications of what we'd discovered. The crystal technology could solve humanity's energy problems, cure diseases, even allow us to travel between the stars. But it could also create weapons that would make nuclear bombs look like firecrackers in comparison. "So what's your solution?" I asked, though I could already see the answer in his eyes. We pretend this never happened? We file a standard mission report and let the Harvest fleet arrive in 67 years to find a completely unprepared world. Our communication system crackled with another transmission from Houston, Director Brooks's voice cutting through the static with increasing urgency. Apollo 18, we're showing anomalous readings from your sample containers. Please confirm your cargo manifest and storage procedures. I exchanged glances with Jazz, knowing that the crystalline fragments were still active despite being sealed in supposedly radiation-proof containers. The ancient technology was trying to communicate with something, sending signals into space that our instruments could detect but not decode. For all we knew, every intelligence in the galaxy now knew exactly where we were and what we had taken. The samples are secure, Houston, I replied, technically telling the truth while omitting the fact that secure didn't mean inactive. All materials collected according to standard protocols. During our third day of flight, as Earth's blue-white surface filled our command module's windows, Jazz made his decision. I found him in the equipment bay, systematically destroying data files from our EVA recorders, erasing hours of documentation that proved the existence of the underground complex. "What are you doing?" I demanded, grabbing his arm as he reached for the backup storage systems. "Protecting humanity from itself," he replied, his voice steady despite the tears floating in spherical droplets around his eyes in the zero-gravity environment. "I've seen what happens when powerful nations get access to weapons they don't understand. We'll turn that alien technology against ourselves long before any Harvest fleet arrives." We struggled in the confined space of the command module, floating and spinning as we fought for control of the mission records. In the low gravity, every movement sent us careening off walls and instrument panels, our actions clumsy and desperate. I managed to save some of the files, downloading them onto personal storage devices that I hid inside my suit's life support systems. "You're condemning our entire species," I said as Jazz completed his systematic destruction of evidence. "Without proof, without documentation, nobody will believe what we found. They'll dismiss it as space hallucinations or post-mission psychological trauma." Jazz secured himself back in his acceleration couch, his hands trembling as he stared at Earth growing larger in our windows. "Maybe that's for the best. Maybe some knowledge is too dangerous for our species to handle. Maybe the previous harvest cycles happened because civilizations destroyed themselves when they learned the truth." The possibility hit me like cosmic radiation, cold, invisible, and ultimately deadly. What if the Harvest fleet didn't need to destroy civilizations directly? What if they simply waited for species to tear themselves apart fighting over the advanced technology they discovered? What if panic and warfare did most of the harvesting work for them? As we prepared for re-entry, I made my own decision. The crystal fragments in our sample containers would disappear into NASA's storage facilities, forgotten among thousands of lunar specimens collected over multiple missions. But the information I had saved, the weapon specifications and defensive technologies, would find their way to people who could use them responsibly. Scientists, engineers, military leaders who understood that humanity's survival depended on unity rather than conquest. "Houston, this is Apollo 18 beginning re-entry procedures." I radioed as Earth's atmosphere began buffeting our command module with increasing intensity. Through the heat-distorted windows, I could see the lights of cities scattered across the night side of our planet, millions of people going about their daily lives completely unaware that their world had just been marked for cosmic harvest. But I also saw something else in those lights, the spark of human ingenuity, the same curiosity and determination that had carried us to the moon in the first place. If any species in the galaxy could find a way to fight back against the harvesters, it would be humanity. We had 67 years to prove that we were more than just another crop ready for collection. The only question was whether we could survive learning the truth about our place in the universe, or whether the knowledge itself would destroy us before the Harvest fleet ever arrived. As our heat shield glowed white-hot around us, beginning our descent toward a world that would never be the same, I clutched the hidden data storage devices and prepared to spend the rest of my life walking the narrow line between saving humanity and destroying it with the truth. The metal chair felt cold against my back as I sat in the windowless room deep inside NASA's headquarters. 3 days had passed since Jazz and I returned from the moon, and sleep hadn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those ancient symbols carved into the lunar rock, shifting and moving like they were alive. The crystal weed found pulsed in my dreams, showing me visions of worlds I couldn't understand. Director Brooks walked into the room carrying a thick folder. Her shoes clicked against the polished floor like a countdown timer. Behind her came Commander Wendy Darling, holding a recording device and wearing the kind of serious expression that meant trouble was coming. They sat across from me at the metal table, and I noticed how their chairs scraped against the floor in perfect harmony, like they'd practiced this meeting before. "Peter," Director Brooks began, opening the folder to reveal photographs of our landing site. "We need to talk about your extended moonwalk with Captain Hook." She spread the pictures across the table like playing cards, each one showing the Taurus Littrow Valley from different angles. But something was wrong with the images. The crater walls looked smooth and untouched, nothing like what Jazz and I had discovered. My heart started beating faster as I studied the photographs. Where were the geometric patterns we'd found? Where were the tunnel entrances that had led us deep into the moon's ancient secrets? The pictures showed nothing but ordinary rock and dust, as if our discovery had been erased from history itself. "These photos were taken by our orbital reconnaissance satellites," Wendy said, her voice steady but her eyes watching my every reaction. "They show your landing zone exactly as expected. Standard geological formations, typical lunar terrain, nothing unusual." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But your mission reports mention anomalous readings and extended exploration time." I looked back and forth between the two women, feeling like a mouse caught between two cats. "The structures were there," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Jazz saw them too. We both went inside the tunnels and found that chamber with the crystal device." Director Brooks reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small metal container. She opened it carefully, revealing the crystal weed brought back from the moon. But now it looked different somehow, duller and lifeless, like a piece of ordinary quartz you might find in any geology classroom. The strange inner light that had pulsed during our journey home was completely gone. "This is interesting rock," Brooks said, picking up the crystal and turning it over in her hands. "Our laboratory analysis shows it's composed of standard silicate minerals, probably formed by ancient meteor impacts. Nothing more exotic than what we've found in dozens of other lunar samples." She set it down on the table with a soft click. "Certainly nothing that would cause hallucinations or false memories." The word hallucinations hit me like a punch to the stomach. Were they suggesting that Jazz and I had imagined everything? That the ancient chambers, the impossible technology, the visions of dying civilizations had all been products of our confused minds? I picked up the crystal, hoping to feel that strange connection again, but it remained cold and lifeless in my palm. "Peter," Wendy said, leaning forward with what looked like genuine concern. "Extended time in space can affect the human brain in unexpected ways. The isolation, the radiation exposure, the stress of being so far from Earth, these factors can create very convincing false experiences." She gestured toward a stack of medical reports. "We've documented similar cases with other astronauts who've spent long periods in deep space environments. But I knew what I had seen and felt. The crystal had shown me things that felt more real than the room I was sitting in now. Ancient cities rising from alien oceans. Vast machines that could move between stars like stepping stones. And something else. Something that watched from the darkness between worlds, patient and hungry and getting closer." Director Brooks stood up and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner of the room. She pulled out another folder, this one marked with red security stamps and warning labels. "Peter, I'm going to share something with you that's classified at the highest levels," she said, returning to the table. "We've had 3 other incidents similar to yours over the past decade. Astronauts reporting impossible discoveries, bringing back samples they claimed had special properties, insisting they'd made contact with alien intelligence." She opened the folder to reveal mission reports, medical evaluations, and photographs of other astronauts. Their faces looked haunted, their eyes holding the same desperate conviction that I felt burning in my chest. Captain Maria Santos from the Mars reconnaissance mission claimed she found underground cities. Commander Zhang Wei from the Asteroid Mining Survey reported discovering ancient machinery in the asteroid belt. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Thompson from the Jupiter Orbital Mission insisted she'd received messages from an alien intelligence. My mouth went dry as I looked at the reports. Each story sounded familiar, like echoes of my own experience. But where were these astronauts now? Why hadn't I heard about their discoveries before? What happened to them? I asked, though part of me already feared the answer. They received treatment for space-induced psychosis, Wendy said softly. All of them recovered completely and went on to successful careers in private industry. They're living normal, happy lives now, with full medical benefits and generous retirement packages. She paused, watching my reaction carefully. They all came to understand that what they experienced wasn't real, Peter. Just like you will. Director Brooks closed the folder and looked directly into my eyes. We're offering you the same opportunity, Peter. Full medical support, psychological counseling, and a generous settlement that will ensure your financial security for life. All we need is your cooperation in revising your mission report to reflect the actual events of your lunar surface operations. The room fell silent except for the humming of the air conditioning system. I could feel both women waiting for my response, their expectations pressing down on me like the weight of Earth's atmosphere after the freedom of space. The crystal sat on the table between us, looking like nothing more than a pretty rock that someone might use as a paperweight. But deep in my mind, I could still hear it calling to me, whispering about ancient secrets and approaching danger, showing me flashes of vast ships moving between the stars, following pathways that led directly to our small blue world. The visions felt more real than the sterile room around me, more true than the official photographs that denied what I had experienced. I need time to think, I said finally, standing up from the metal chair. My legs felt unsteady, like I was still adjusting to Earth's gravity after our return from the moon. Director Brooks nodded and gathered her papers. Of course, take all the time you need, Peter, but remember, some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. And some truths are too dangerous for the world to know. The motel room smelled like old cigarettes and broken dreams. I'd been hiding there for 2 weeks, watching the news reports that described Apollo 18 as a routine scientific mission with standard geological findings. Every channel told the same story, using the same sanitized language that made our incredible discovery sound as boring as counting rocks in a parking lot. But I knew the truth was still out there, buried under layers of official denial and government cover-ups. My laptop screen glowed in the darkness as I searched through classified databases, using access codes that technically no longer belonged to me. NASA had terminated my security clearance the day after I walked out of that meeting with Director Brooks, but the computer systems hadn't caught up with the paperwork yet. I had maybe hours before they discovered my digital footprints and shut down my access forever. The first breakthrough came at 3 in the morning. Hidden in a folder marked Equipment Malfunction Reports, I found references to unusual electromagnetic readings from 12 different space missions over the past 15 years. Mars rovers detecting signals from empty craters. Deep space telescopes recording energy patterns that didn't match any known natural phenomena. Communication satellites picking up transmissions from coordinates where nothing should exist. Each report had been classified and buried, marked with codes that meant never investigate further. But taken together, they painted a picture of something vast and organized watching our solar system. Something that had been waiting patiently while humanity took its first baby steps beyond Earth's protective atmosphere. A soft knock at my motel room door made me freeze. It was too late for housekeeping and too early for breakfast. I closed the laptop and moved carefully to the window, peering through the stained curtains at the empty parking lot. A woman stood at my door, wearing a worn leather jacket and carrying what looked like a military surplus backpack. She had short gray hair and scars on her hands that suggested she'd spent time working with dangerous equipment. "Commander Pansky," she called softly. "My name is Tink Belsky. I was a cosmonaut with the Soviet lunar program before it was officially canceled in 1976. She paused, looking directly at the window where I was hiding. "I know what you found up there because I found something similar on Luna 25. I opened the door cautiously, keeping the security chain attached. Through the narrow gap, I could see her face clearly now. Her eyes held the same haunted expression I'd been seeing in my mirror every morning since returning from the moon. The look of someone who'd seen too much and couldn't forget any of it. The official records say Luna 25 never launched, I said, testing her knowledge. The official records say a lot of things that aren't true, she replied, reaching into her jacket pocket. I tensed, ready to slam the door, but she only pulled out a small object wrapped in black cloth. This might look familiar to you. She unwrapped the cloth to reveal a crystal identical to the one Jazz and I had found. But unlike the lifeless stones sitting in NASA's laboratory, this one pulsed with that same inner light I remembered from our journey home. Waves of energy seemed to flow through its translucent structure, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. I unhooked the security chain and let her into the room. She set the crystal on the small table next to my laptop, and immediately the computer screen began flickering with interference. Lines of text appeared and disappeared too quickly to read, as if the crystal was trying to communicate through electronic devices. There are others, Tink said, sitting down on the uncomfortable motel chair. Former astronauts and cosmonauts from 7 different countries, all with similar stories. We've been finding each other slowly, carefully, because we know what happens to people who talk too openly about what they've discovered. She opened her backpack and pulled out files, photographs, and what looked like hand-drawn maps. The Chinese taikonaut program encountered structures on the far side of the moon in 2019. The European Space Agency found similar artifacts in the asteroid belt 2 years later. Each discovery was classified, covered up, and the astronauts involved were quietly transferred to other projects or forced into early retirement. I picked up one of the photographs, which showed geometric patterns carved into an asteroid's surface. The symbols looked remarkably similar to what Jazz and I had found in the lunar tunnels, but these were clearly much larger and more complex. How many sites have been discovered? I asked. At least 15 that we know about, Tink replied, spreading a hand-drawn map across the table. All throughout the solar system, from Mars to the outer planets. Every major space agency has found something, but they're all pretending it doesn't exist. She pointed to various marks on the map. The pattern suggests these aren't random discoveries. Someone or something placed these artifacts deliberately, creating a network that spans our entire solar system. The crystal on the table pulsed brighter, and suddenly my laptop screen filled with images I'd never seen before. Ancient cities floating in the vacuum of space. Massive ships with designs that seemed to flow like liquid metal. And creatures that looked almost human but moved in ways that defied physics, their forms shifting between solid matter and pure energy. The crystals are more than just artifacts, Tink explained as we watched the impossible images flow across the screen. They're recording devices, memory banks that contain the history of civilizations that existed millions of years before humanity evolved. But they're also something else, beacons that send signals into deep space whenever they're activated. A chill ran down my spine as I understood the implications. We turned them on, I whispered. By finding them and bringing them back to Earth, we activated the network. Exactly, Tink said grimly. And according to the signals we've been intercepting, something has been responding to those beacons. Something that's been traveling toward our solar system for the past 3 years, following the pathways marked by the artifacts we've been discovering. The motel room suddenly felt very small and exposed. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark sky, wondering what might be watching us from the spaces between stars. How long do we have? I asked. Based on the signal patterns and trajectory calculations, we estimate 18 to 24 months before they arrive, Tink replied, packing the crystal back into its protective cloth. Maybe less if they have technology that can bend space-time the way these artifacts suggest. She stood up and shouldered her backpack, preparing to leave. There's a meeting tomorrow night in an abandoned observatory outside Phoenix. For others will be there, including a former NASA engineer who's been analyzing the electromagnetic signatures of the artifacts. We're trying to understand what's coming and whether there's anything we can do to prepare. After she left, I sat alone in the dark motel room, staring at my reflection in the black laptop screen. The crystal's influence lingered in the air like ozone after a lightning strike, filling my mind with fragments of alien memories and half-understood warnings. Whatever was coming had been patient for millions of years, waiting for the right moment to harvest what it had planted in our solar system long before the first humans looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone. The official story said we'd never found anything unusual on the moon, but the truth was spreading through a hidden network of exiled astronauts and suppressed discoveries, building toward a revelation that would change everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. And time was running out to decide whether we would face the coming darkness as victims or as something more. The stolen spacecraft shuddered as we broke through Earth's atmosphere, its hull glowing red-hot from the friction of our desperate escape. 18 months had passed since that meeting in the abandoned observatory, and everything had changed. The signals from deep space were getting stronger every day, and satellite telescopes were picking up massive objects moving between Jupiter and Saturn, heading directly toward Earth. Tink Belsky gripped her safety harness as our makeshift crew of 4 prepared for what might be humanity's last secret mission to the moon. Beside her sat Mikhail Pan, a former European Space Agency astronaut, whose hands shook slightly from the experimental drugs we'd all taken to survive the radiation exposure from our unshielded ship. In the pilot's seat, Slightly Cunningham worked the controls with the steady focus of someone who'd spent years building rockets in hidden warehouses, funding our impossible dream with money stolen from defense contractors who would never admit the theft. Lunar orbit in 6 hours, Slightly announced, his voice crackling through our cheap communication system. Ground control is screaming at us on 17 different frequencies, demanding we identify ourselves and return to Earth immediately. He laughed bitterly as he switched off the radio. Too bad we can't tell them we're trying to save their lives. Through the small porthole, I watched Earth shrink behind us, its blue surface marred by the growing hurricane systems that had been ravaging the planet for months. The weather patterns weren't natural. They followed the same geometric designs we'd found carved into lunar rock, as if something was testing Earth's atmospheric defenses before a larger assault began. The moon grew larger in our viewport, its familiar gray surface hiding secrets that governments would kill to protect. But we weren't government agents anymore. We were 4 broken astronauts flying a ship held together with salvaged parts and desperate hope, carrying equipment that shouldn't exist toward a destination that officially didn't matter. There, I said, pointing toward the Taurus Littrow Valley as it came into view. Grid reference Tango 7. Exactly where Jazz and I found the first structures. But even from orbit, I could see that something had changed. The crater walls that had been smooth and unmarked in NASA's official photographs now showed clear signs of excavation and construction activity. Mikhail pressed his face against the porthole, his breath fogging the glass. "Those aren't natural formations," he whispered, his Russian accent thick with amazement. "Someone has been building something down there, something massive." Long geometric structures stretched across the crater floor like the skeleton of some impossible machine, their surfaces reflecting sunlight in patterns that hurt to look at directly. We landed our stolen ship 3 kilometers from the construction site, using manual controls because our navigation systems went crazy whenever we got close to the ancient structures. The moment my boots touched lunar soil again, I felt the familiar electric tingle that meant the crystals were active and responding to our presence. But this time, the sensation was much stronger, like standing next to a power plant that was building towards some kind of explosive release. Tink unpacked the scanning equipment we'd built in secret over the past year, using designs reverse-engineered from the crystal artifacts we'd been collecting. "The electromagnetic readings are off the charts," she reported, her voice tight with controlled fear. "Whatever they're building down there is drawing power from the moon's core itself." We hiked across the ancient regolith toward the construction site, our footprints joining thousands of others that crisscrossed the lunar surface like a map of secret visits. How many astronauts had come here over the years? How many missions had been covered up to hide the growing alien presence in our solar system? The structures were even more impressive up close, towers of crystalline material that seemed to grow directly from the moon's bedrock, connected by bridges of flowing metal that moved like liquid but supported weight like solid steel. At the center of the complex stood a massive device that pulsed with the same inner light we'd learned to recognize in the smaller artifacts, but amplified beyond anything we'd encountered before. "It's a transmitter," Slightly breathed, his engineering background allowing him to recognize the device's purpose, even though its design came from technology millions of years more advanced than anything humans had created. They're not just sending signals into deep space anymore. They're communicating in real time with something that's already here. Mikhail had wandered ahead of the group, drawn by curiosity toward one of the crystal towers. "Look at this," he called back to us, his voice filled with wonder and terror. "There are viewing screens embedded in the structure, showing images from Earth." We gathered around the translucent wall, watching as scenes from major cities flashed by like a surveillance system monitoring the entire planet. But these weren't just random images. The screens showed detailed maps of military installations, power grids, communication networks, and population centers. Whoever was watching Earth through these devices had been studying us with the patience of scientists observing laboratory specimens. "They know everything about us," Tink said, her face pale in the reflected light from the crystal screens. "Our defenses, our weaknesses, our technology levels. This isn't first contact, it's preparation for conquest." A new image appeared on the screens that made my blood freeze. Massive ships, each one larger than a city, moving through space toward Earth with the steady inevitability of falling rocks. But these weren't the graceful vessels I'd seen in the crystal visions. These ships looked like weapons, their hulls covered in what appeared to be harvesting equipment designed to strip resources from entire planets. "How long?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Slightly was studying readings from his handheld scanner, his face grim with concentration. "Based on their current trajectory and speed, I'd estimate 6 weeks until they reach Earth orbit," he said quietly. "Maybe 8 if they slow down for final approach maneuvers." The crystal transmitter pulsed brighter, and suddenly we could hear voices, not through our communication equipment, but directly in our minds. The alien language was unlike anything human, but somehow we understood the meaning behind the complex harmonies and mathematical structures that formed their words. "The harvest approaches completion. Planetary defenses remain minimal. Biological resources at optimal density for collection. Proceed to final phase activation. Understood. Harvest command. Local resistance elements have been identified and monitored. Shall we eliminate the observers? Negative. Their broadcasts serve our purposes. Let them spread fear among their species. Panic will reduce organized resistance when collection begins." The voices faded, leaving us standing in the lunar dust with the terrible knowledge that we'd been allowed to discover this site. Our desperate mission to uncover the truth had been part of their plan all along, and now we were expected to return to Earth and spread the news that would break humanity's spirit before the real battle began. "We have to get back," I said, backing away from the crystal screens that continued showing Earth cities like targets in a bombing site. "People need to know what's coming, even if it causes panic." But as we turned to leave, the lunar surface around us began to change. The ancient regolith shifted and moved, revealing hidden passages and chambers that stretched deep into the moon's interior. We weren't just standing on humanity's graveyard, we were standing inside the command center that would coordinate our species' destruction. The communications satellite felt like a metal coffin floating in the darkness above Earth, its solar panels catching sunlight while the planet spun slowly beneath me like a blue marble balanced on the edge of forever. I had stolen the satellite using access codes from my old NASA days, overriding its normal functions to create a broadcast station that could reach every television, radio, and internet connection on the planet simultaneously. Through the small porthole, I watched the massive alien ships approach Earth's outer atmosphere, their hulls glowing with energy that made our sun look dim by comparison. 6 vessels, each one large enough to hold entire cities, moving with the patient certainty of predators who had hunted across the galaxy for millions of years. The crystal device from our lunar mission sat beside me, pulsing with urgent warnings as it showed me visions of what these creatures had done to other worlds. My finger hovered over the transmission button, while voices from mission control screamed through the radio, demanding that I surrender the satellite and return to Earth immediately. Director Brooks herself was on the emergency frequency, her voice tight with controlled fury as she threatened everything from criminal prosecution to military action against my position. "Commander Pansky," You are in violation of 17 federal laws and 3 international treaties," she said, her words cutting through the static like laser beams. "Whatever you think you're doing up there, it's not worth destroying your life and career over a handful of unusual rocks." But the crystal showed me the truth about those rocks. They weren't just artifacts from an ancient civilization. They were seed pods, planted throughout our solar system millions of years ago by the same species that was approaching Earth now. Each discovery we'd made, each secret mission that had been covered up, had been part of a vast cultivation project designed to prepare humanity for harvest when we reached the proper level of technological development. The alien ships had stopped just outside Earth's atmosphere, their massive forms blocking stars as they took positions around the planet like farmers preparing to gather their crops. On the crystal's surface, I could see their harvesting equipment extending toward Earth, energy beams that could drain a planet's resources in hours, leaving behind nothing but a hollow shell drifting through space. But there was something else in the visions, something the aliens hadn't expected. Other civilizations, scattered across distant galaxies, had faced the same threat and found ways to survive. Not by fighting, which was impossible against technology so advanced, but by changing themselves in ways their enemies couldn't predict or control. The crystal pulsed brighter, showing me images of planets that had transformed themselves when the harvesters arrived. Civilizations that had learned to exist as pure energy, spreading their consciousness across star systems faster than any physical ship could follow. Worlds that had discovered how to phase between dimensions, becoming invisible to harvesting equipment designed for three-dimensional matter. "This is your final warning, Pansky," Director Brooks said, her voice now backed by the authority of military commanders who were probably tracking my position with weapons systems. "Shut down your transmission equipment and prepare for immediate retrieval, or we will be forced to take more direct action." I laughed, thinking about the irony of humans threatening me while alien ships prepared to drain our planet like a battery. The crystal showed me one more vision, Earth's possible future if I made the right choice. Humanity transformed, evolved, spread across the galaxy as beings of pure thought and energy, impossible to harvest because we would no longer exist in the physical form our enemies expected. "People of Earth," I began, pressing the transmission button and feeling the satellite's communication array come to life. "This is Commander Peter Pansky, broadcasting from orbit aboard a stolen communications satellite. For the past 3 years, your governments have been lying to you about humanity's place in the universe. Through the crystal, I could see my transmission reaching every electronic device on the planet. Television screens flickered to life in homes and businesses. Radio broadcasts were interrupted by my voice. Internet connections carried my words to billions of people who had never heard the truth about what their space agencies had been hiding. The Apollo 18 mission did happen," I continued, watching Earth turn below me while alien ships moved into harvesting positions around the planet's poles. "We found evidence of ancient alien technology on the moon, artifacts that revealed humanity is not alone in the universe. But we are not being visited by explorers or diplomats. We are being prepared for harvest by creatures who see us as nothing more than a resource to be collected." The crystal showed me reaction shots from around the world. People in their homes, staring at television screens with expressions of disbelief and growing fear. Government officials in emergency meetings, shouting at subordinates to cut my transmission before mass panic set in. Military commanders looking at radar screens that showed objects too large to be natural satellites. "Look up at the sky," I said, my voice now reaching over 7 billion people simultaneously. "The lights you see moving between the stars aren't planets or satellites. They are harvest ships, each one capable of draining our planet's resources and collecting our population for purposes I don't want to imagine." But even as I spoke, I realized that fear alone wouldn't save humanity. The crystal had shown me civilizations that had panicked when the harvesters arrived, and panic had only made the collection process easier. What we needed wasn't terror, it was transformation. "However," I continued, feeling the crystal's energy flowing through my words, "there is another option. The same artifacts that revealed our danger also contain the key to our survival. Ancient civilizations faced this threat before us and found ways to evolve beyond the reach of physical harvesting technology." The crystal pulsed, sending out waves of energy that somehow reached every electronic device carrying my transmission. Around the world, people began reporting strange sensations, tingling in their hands, visions of distant galaxies, an overwhelming sense of connection to something vast and intelligent that existed beyond the boundaries of normal space and time. "The change is already beginning," I said, feeling my own body starting to dissolve at the edges as the crystal's energy transformed me into something new. "Those of you who can feel it happening, don't fight the sensation. This is evolution, not destruction. We are becoming something our enemies cannot harvest because we will no longer exist in the same dimension they occupy." Through the porthole, I watched the alien harvest ships moving closer to Earth's atmosphere, their energy beams preparing to begin the collection process. But something was wrong with their approach. The beams passed through empty space where they should have encountered solid matter, as if significant portions of Earth's population were no longer fully present in normal reality. "The transformation is voluntary," I continued, my voice now reaching people who were phasing between dimensions as their consciousness expanded beyond the limits of biological existence. "Those who choose to remain physical will be protected by those who choose to transcend. We are not abandoning our humanity. We are fulfilling its ultimate potential." The crystal in my hands crumbled to dust as its energy transferred completely into the global transmission network, but I could still see through its otherworldly senses. Across Earth, millions of people were making the choice to evolve, their bodies dissolving into pure consciousness, while their minds joined a vast network of intelligence that spanned multiple dimensions. The alien harvest ships circled the planet like frustrated predators, their equipment designed to collect physical matter and biological specimens, but unable to process beings that existed as pure thought and energy. After several hours of failed attempts, they began to withdraw, their mission compromised by prey that had learned to escape through evolution rather than resistance. But the transformation wasn't complete, and it never would be. Some humans chose to remain physical, rebuilding their civilization with the knowledge that they were now protected by evolved guardians who existed in dimensions beyond normal space. The crystals continued to appear throughout the solar system, no longer as tools of an approaching harvest, but as gateways for those ready to take the next step in human development. I felt my own physical form dissolving completely as my consciousness joined the vast network of transformed humanity. But I wasn't disappearing. I was becoming part of something infinitely larger and more complex than anything I had imagined during my years as an astronaut exploring the physical universe. From this new perspective, I could see that the alien harvesters were not the ultimate threat, merely one challenge in an endless series of evolutionary tests that determined which species would survive to spread intelligence throughout the galaxy. Humanity had passed its first test, but there would be others, requiring different kinds of courage and different forms of transcendence. The story was far from over. It was just beginning.